Hi everyone, welcome to Profiles. Our guest is Rob Buck, guitarist with the 10,000 Maniacs. He has been with the Maniacs since their inception, which was right here in Jamestown, New York. He has toured the United States and Europe and has enjoyed success with the Maniacs. Please stay tuned for an interesting look into the life of a rock star. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Rob, I wanted to start off, I know in my intro I mentioned that the Maniacs originated from Jamestown, but you are also a native. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically. I'm from Chandler's Valley, Pennsylvania, not far from Jamestown, just a few miles. And this was the big city when I was a kid.
Right. Did you ever, at one point in your lives, did your family move to Jamestown? Or?
Yeah, when I was in high school.
And then I wanted to also find out what was a turning point, perhaps, or a memory that you would have where you came upon the realization that you wanted to be a musician?
Oh, gosh, I'd say when I watched the original Johnny Cash show when I was about 5 years old. And I wanted to be Johnny Cash.
You have a low voice like he does. And then what happened after that?
I started taking guitar lessons at the age of 5 and piano lessons, and then pretty soon my grandmother dressed me up like Johnny Cash, and I learned the entire Johnny Cash songbook by about the age of 7, and I'd perform in churches around the area, do gospel numbers, all sorts of really embarrassing stuff for a young boy.
Well, that's what you might think now, but it's not. It's endearing to people. People enjoy that, especially your parents.
Yeah, but I mean, at the time, I hated it. I used to, cry all night before I'd have to do a performance. I really couldn't stand it. But
which is interesting because you lived through it and, continued on along that road and are still pursuing that today.
Well, yeah, no, but I got out of that phase. Now it doesn't bother me at all to walk on stage in front of a dozen or, 12,000 people. It doesn't make any difference.
Did you actually end up in college for the educational end of music, or?
No, I never. Once I quit taking lessons when I was 14 or 15, I just pursued it on my own and went to college and studied archaeology, but mainly I did that because I'd go on digs and things and just jam on guitar all night long with
Isn't that
people.
Interesting? So that was kind of totally off the path that you maybe when you were young originally thought that you were going to pursue.
Yeah.
Huh. So then, getting to the Maniacs, the 10,000 Maniacs, where did you hook up with them?
Let's see, I was going to JCC part-time and working at a local factory in Jamestown. And I used to hear Steve, on the bass player, on the radio, DJing on Friday nights. And he was playing lots of music that I listened to and owned myself, a lot of things like The Clash, Elvis Costello, Bob Marley, things like that. So I'd start to call him and request things on Friday nights. Never knew who he was. And then I formed a band with some friends of mine called The Obsessions, and we played a lot of that kind of music. And Steve and Dennis and even Natalie at the time started to show up at our gigs. And then that band split up, and I got a hold of Steve and Dennis and said, hey, you guys want to be in a band? And they said, well, we don't play any instruments, really. I said, well, that's okay. You got the right attitude. What do you want to learn? Just pick something up and learn it. And they did, and Natalie sort of came along. And
that's interesting, because as the public, I personally wouldn't think that you could just set your mind to it, especially at an older age, and pick up an instrument and get so in tune to it and become as professional as each member was and is.
Well, it's a lot easier to play music than most people think, and if you're musically inclined anyway. But that was sort of the era for that style of thing, with like I said, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, a lot of bands that couldn't really, weren't really professional musicians, and it was kind of the style and era of music we came out of in the late 70s and early 80s. And all those bands, that was the whole attitude, was just an amateur sort of attitude. But the important thing was what you thought about playing and the whole, your whole attitude towards it.
Would that have been considered very progressive back then?
Yeah.
those particular groups and the music that was being played.
Yeah, because you didn't hear that music on the radio, and it was pretty underground. I mean, just a handful of people had ever heard of that music. And in the early days of the Maniacs, we'd do a lot of covers by bands like that, and The Cure, and Joy Division, and people thought we wrote them. I mean, no one realized they were even covered.
Heard them before.
No.
Those are some of my favorite groups today.
Yeah.
Still.
Oh, me too, still, yeah. But it was definitely from that era. It was a big influence, you know, and having those bands just say, we can do it. Doesn't make any difference. You don't have to be a professional or good. Just do it if you got something to say.
Right. So some of your music is probably quite political in one sense or another.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, almost. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily political, more social commentary than political, really. Just commenting on things that, you know, well, Natalie writes all the lyrics, and she talks a lot about things she sees in the world and everyday life that happens around her.
Right, which, you know, it goes from politics then to social, and then, you know, keeps going down the ladder, kind of.
Yeah.
And you have to start at a lower level and try to make a statement and gather people together, get support, which you guys do very well. Let's back up a little bit and I think a lot of people would like to know how the Maniacs progressed, because it's like a 1 in a million shot at becoming as successful as you guys did and still are. And I think maybe a lot of bands out there wonder what kind of steps you took. I'm sure there's a little bit of luck involved at certain times, but there must be some kind of progression that you need to take, you know, certain steps.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that would be?
We decided after playing around Jamestown for a while that we wanted to pursue it as a career, and that we really wanted to get a major label deal. That was our main thing that we decided to do as a band. So we made up a list of what we should do, and we said first thing to do is to go on tour. We had no idea of what that was like, and we'd just call friends and say, can you get us a gig in a bar in your hometown? And we spent the first year and a half sleeping on people's floors, traveling from town to town, having no money, but at the same time, and we also made our own record, was one of the first things we did too, and paid for it. Our parents helped us pay for it. And we promoted that by calling up college stations all around the country, and just independent record stores, and getting them to take copies of the record. And, you know, and Dennis was really great making phone calls, so he'd make the phone calls, and I was good at driving and working on the van, so I'd work on the van and drive. We all had little things that we do, but we just made this sort of plan up of just going out there and playing, and eventually going to New York and getting recognition with our record, and dealing with record companies and having them come out and see us. But we didn't go there right away by any means. We made sure that we knew what we were doing, and were kind of established in our own thing before we went to any record companies.
Right. Rob, we've got to take a break, but we'll be right back, so don't go away. Guitarist with the 10,000 Maniacs. And we were talking about how you kind of took different steps in order to just to reach the next level in, you know, attaining the success you have today. And the way it sounded was that you went without a manager, without a promotional agent. You kind of just followed your own instincts, more or less.
Yeah. Well, we knew that college radio, since Dennis and Steve had both been involved in local college radio, we knew that that was pretty important for underground bands around the country. And there was like the College Media Journal, which, you know, was a organization of all the college radio stations. And then there was, I can't think of the name of it, but there's this guy in New York City who does a thing every year still, focusing on independent bands. And it's like a big convention that they have every year in New York City. And so we'd go to that and shop tapes around. But I guess the most important thing to do is to make your own album, number one, and number two, go out and really tour, even though there might not seem like you make any money or there's any place to play. Because when you have your own album, record companies will really take a much more serious look at you. They know that you can make a product. And how
much, you know, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but how much would you have to invest in creating that first album?
Oh, not much at all. Certainly less than, probably to record it, $500, maybe $1,000. And we just went into Fredonia in the college studios in the Tonmeister program, and which is a great program. And they have to do projects every semester. And we got a Tonmeister to record us as their project. And I think the whole thing costs like, $300, and took us 24 hours straight. We just stayed in the studio for 24 hours straight, recorded the whole thing, and then had it vanity pressed, which, was doing it on your own, obviously, and just our parents loaned us, about $3,000, and we had 1,000 copies of our record pressed up and started selling them. But also we sent a lot of them out to college radio stations around the country. We had huge lists of stations.
Do you think that network exists today as much, or was that kind of indicative of the era once again?
I think it still exists. I think college radio still exists. I'm not sure that it's quite as wild as it used to be. I hear a lot more standard pop and heavy metal on college radio today, but it still is a very thriving underground music scene. But there aren't as many gigs as there were back then. Because back then each small town had an underground sort of new wave club that you could play at, and I don't think that circuit is quite as big as it used to be. So that part of it isn't as easy to do.
Mm-hmm. I like the way you guys went about it. I mean, it's kind of like there are other ways of doing things besides going out and spending the top dollar. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
That kind of, thought.
Yeah, and also you have a lot more control over what you do, which, we've always really wanted to maintain control of everything, and we have. Even to this day, our record company, Elektra, is just great about that. They let us do anything we want, even things that are stupid.
But you want to do them.
Yeah, but we don't know they're dumb till we've done them, but they go, okay, go ahead, okay. They'll learn.
Right. That's kind of neat. That's unusual.
Yeah,
Are you under a more unusual or more liberal label?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Elektra is, probably the hippest label in the industry today. And the president of Elektra, Bob Krasnow, is a real big fan of ours and has always been really supportive of what we do and thinks that we're a really important band for his label. I don't know why, but...
That's terrific, though.
Yeah, it is.
That's the right person to have like you, that's for sure. I wanted to ask you if there was a time when or how you were actually, quote unquote, discovered.
Well, I guess there was. Probably one particular night we played at a club called Danceteria in New York City, and all of a sudden that night A&R people showed up from like every record company that there was, and they all looked and saw that everyone else was there, and so they thought, God, there must be something to this. And that's kind of how the A&R business works. If they look around and see all their people who work for other companies there, they go, God, maybe there's something here. And I think that was kind of the night that, everything started to happen as far as a major label. And then probably about 6 months later, we signed to Elektra.
Did things happen real fast after that, as far as touring the U.S. or Europe, or?
Well, we had already toured U.S. and Europe before we were on a major label. Mm-hmm. We'd done both those on our own already.
You guys went over to Europe and did that on your own too?
Yeah, the first time.
That's
we had.
Yeah. Say the least.
And but yeah, Elektra, they were real good to us from the start, and it's been pretty easy for us, I think, for some reason.
I was going to ask you, because I wondered if this were more of a norm that was taking place in the industry, as far as bands going over to Europe and becoming popular over there first and then coming home. Maybe I'm not, understanding your route as correctly as I should, but I kind of got the impression that you became a hit over in Europe more so before you came back to the States and became a hit.
Well, we got a lot of really good press in Europe. It isn't that we were selling out huge concert halls or anything, but the European press, like the regular music press, the equivalent of Rolling Stone and Spin magazines and those things in America, were much more open to independent bands, and we sort of became the flavor of the month for a while, like these hicks from, some small town in the Midwest somewhere, and they just took a liking to us.
So that's not really a trend necessarily.
No, as a matter of fact, I can't think of at the moment really any other bands hardly that did that for a long time.
Because I kind of wondered why you took that route, if indeed that was the way smaller bands that aren't known yet go. But that's not necessarily so. That was kind of your choice.
Yeah, but we didn't know that they would really like us that well either.
And I'm sure it was a nice opportunity to travel and experience very different culture than the United States.
Yeah, and to travel at a very low level with hardly any money, and just...
What a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, it paid off, but boy, you guys paid your dues, put it that way.
Yeah, but it was it was a very good time too. You get to meet a lot of people and really find out what towns were about and different areas were about, and get a real feeling for most of the world.
From the point that you guys got together and were kind of finding some success just even in this region to where you are today, how many years has that been?
Oh, 7, 8 years.
See, so in my mind, I find that to be relatively a short period of time.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, we would be what's considered an overnight success in the entertainment industry.
That's terrific. You had a different sound, that's for sure. You had a different sound.
Yeah, well, that luckily, one thing that saved us is the fact that we, generally weren't great musicians, and so we never could just do cover songs and imitate, like, real popular bands, like, Queen, or, who got AC/DC, or, we couldn't even play that music, especially back then in the early days, if we would have wanted to. We didn't want to anyway, but the fact that we were amateur musicians was a saving grace.
Coming up with your own unique style,
so it really did make for
niche.
Yeah, and the reason we sound like we do is because of probably more our limitations than anything else.
That's interesting, because a lot of time with your limitations, as handicapped people do, they overcome it and in some other way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't mean to put it that way.
No, I think that's pretty funny.
That was probably a bad analogy, but if you have a limit, somehow you learn how to overcome
or use it.
Right, or use it, right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, on that note, we've got to take a break. We'll be right back. And we were talking before we left about finding your niche, which you guys did very successfully. Do you categorize your music at all into any kind of greater classification, like country, folk?
Well, I'd have to say we're sort of a classic pop band, because pop music to me is, combining every style of music there is into a format that's, less than 3 minutes per song, and with verse, chorus, so that's basically what we do is pop music.
Right. It's just got such a nice flavor to it. It's not, I don't know, just like as pop as I think of a lot of pop music today.
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely have a lot of different influences that are all heard in it. I mean, luckily everyone in the band has completely different tastes in music, and so I think it's all reflected in our albums.
Do you all collaborate together? Do you all get together and sit down and start pumping out songs, or do you kind of bring your own thoughts at different times to
Generally,
each other?
in the past, we've always brought things in separately, and then, just present the band with chords, and everyone will do their own thing. No one really says, play that on drums, play it on guitar, play it on bass. And then once the song is completely written, then Natalie will write the lyrics to it. But on this last album, we've just been writing in Jamestown. It changed a bit, and a majority of the songs were written all at once together as a band, which is very different for us.
So was that nice? A nice experience?
Yeah, it really
actually?
was. It really was. And I think, some really good material came out of it. It'll be on our next record.
Great. We'll look forward to it.
Yeah.
One thing I like about your group and the videos that you've done is that they're not all sexually oriented. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the perspective you've chosen to take. Instead of selling through sex, you don't need to do that. And I respect that, because so many of groups out there today use sex as a selling technique, which, it works.
It works, and but
There's
it's
more.
just, I mean, that's the lowest common, one of the lowest common denominators to pull to. And I don't know, I think that, you know, just all of us in the band have just found that kind of thing just pretty offensive, really. You know, and
I find it unnecessary most of the time. You know, they don't need that, but they're relying on it because maybe they don't think they're good enough without it or something.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you definitely, if you put the words love, rock and roll, or America in a song, it'll probably sell a lot more. You know, unfortunately, that's true. I don't know why. Whether it's radio that tends to play those things more, or whether the public actually wants to listen to them more, I don't know.
We're kind of geared to wanting. I mean, I think sometimes we not only are demanding, somebody else is creating the demand.
Yeah, I think the public is led a lot by radio and by the media a lot more than anyone realizes.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact of how successful you guys were with a couple of your albums. And I mean, that's absolutely terrific and fabulous, and you're from Jamestown. You're another group of famous people from Jamestown. we can like, hey, we know those guys, they're from our hometown, and that's fun. We can all identify with that. I was wondering how it is to come off of reaching that point of success. Is it hard to then feel like, oh my gosh, we've got to come right back with something just as good, or doesn't that bother you guys?
Well, I don't know. We think about that, but we're not a real success-oriented band. I mean, we found a level that we're very comfortable at, and it doesn't make any difference to us if we sell 1 million more records than we do already. We're pretty comfortable where we're at and have found a niche in the music world, and I don't think we ever planned on being, you know, Bon Jovi or, you know, whoever, a Madonna kind of thing. We never planned on that kind of success, and, you know, I don't think we'll ever have it. I hope not, actually.
You're not that commercially oriented.
No.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of those performers sell themselves out, kind of, to that.
Yeah, they do, and sometimes it's, you know, sad to see. You'll see where someone started out at in their early material, and where they end up at can be a very sad thing and a parody of themselves a lot of times.
Right. Where did your name come from, 10,000 Maniacs?
Well, gosh, this is a really embarrassing, not really embarrassing story. We were sitting around just thinking up names. We had a first gig to play, and we made up a list of names, and one of them was from the movie, which was actually 2,000 Maniacs, but we made a mistake. And so we wrote 10,000 Maniacs on the list, and that's the one we picked. And on that day and time, it was definitely the best name on the list. And sometimes after that, there had been times when we wished we had a different name, but actually it's probably a perfect name because it almost represents what the music is, a real juxtaposition, you know, between real politically and socially oriented lyrics and real light pop melodies. And I think the name reflects that too.
I like the name. As compared to a lot of the names that are coming out, I mean, I don't know. It's
easy
a good
to
name.
Remember.
Yeah, it is, but it's also, I don't know, I like it.
Yeah, I like it too.
Of course, you know, I'm biased, but but anyways, let's see. We also know that you do a lot of nonprofit work. St. Susan's Kitchen, here locally you do nonprofit work.
Yeah.
You also help to organize the cleanup of the Chattacoin, which is really nice. And you do a lot just for our community. Are there other you know, organizations or affiliations that you wanted to mention?
Well, we've always done a lot of work with the Earth Day organizations and the people they support, and the rainforest people, and PETA, which is you know, Protection Against Cruelty for Animals, an organization that is against the, you know, testing in labs and all sorts of god-awful things. And those are a couple of the other organizations we do a lot of work for. But generally, anything that comes along that really, you know, if something strikes our fancy on that day and we go, God, that's a problem, you know, because we're approached by a lot of organizations.
I imagine. But it's really nice that you do it nonchalantly. You don't make a big deal out of you're doing this for free or whatever. You just, it's really nice. It's
well, in
really,
Jamestown,
you know,
too,
unassuming.
we would feel foolish making money in Jamestown. So anytime we do play in Jamestown, we donate all the money to area organizations just because we'd feel stupid taking money from our own community when there's so many other communities to pilfer around America.
Well, we're glad that you're from our hometown. No, I enjoyed, I saw you at the Reggie Linnaeus Center the last time that you played there, and it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, that was a very fun gig. It was like our first real kind of homecoming gig, in a sense. You know, the first time we'd ever sold out a big place in Jamestown, and it was fun. It made us feel really good.
Now, what's coming up for you guys? Are you working on a new album, or are you going to tour soon?
Yeah, well, we've just basically finished writing a new album, and we're looking for a producer right now, and then we'll go in the studio and record it, and it probably won't be released until next spring or summer, and then we'll spend a lot of time touring behind it, you know, which we usually do, a good year or two.
Well, we're definitely going to look forward to the album, because I know I have some of your other albums, and even the oldest one I still listen to today because I just enjoy it so much. I love your music. And I think I can speak for most of the community. We all do. So it's nice having you here, and it's a privilege to have you with us today.
Well, it's fun to be from Jamestown.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I like it here, too. Listen, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you for watching. Join us again for another edition of Profiles.